Thank you so much for tuning into our 8th Divine Clinic Foundation podcast series called Healing is Believing. I'm your host, QW. Joining me is my co-host, the delightful Imam Saab. Today we discuss, is imperfection a perfection? And before we start off, I'd like to acknowledge Imam Saab. Assalamu alaikum. How are you today?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much. Yes, superb. A beautiful, another beautiful day that we've been given here in order to disseminate, beautiful words of wisdom from our teacher to the wider world with regards to everything that we are able to discuss and hopefully a lot more to come, God willing.
Yes, thank you. And this discussion is, when we talk about is imperfection a perfection, the essence in understanding the esoteric and exoteric forms of religion in terms of healing is very crucial, because from a perspective of healing, we need to understand that there is a commitment involved in esoteric practices and exoteric practices. And we know in the esoteric, there is a realm that of the high 7 levels of consciousness, that through the elevation of one's conscious, you're able to get to the higher level within yourself and get closer to God as the veils are uplifted. And we find in the exoteric, where healing is on a cellular level and it's just kind of granular, and there needs to be an understanding of the esoteric principles, so that when people are suffering and praying and they're calling for their prayers to be heard, that there is the deeper connection really comes in understanding the esoteric terms of healing. And with this, Imam Saab, given your insight and able to explain our audience when we talk about the need to understand esoteric and exoteric forms of religion and healing, if you can kindly go ahead and expand on this message that we have today to our audience.
Yeah, sure. Of course. I mean, what we have to understand is it's all from the perspective of healing. Now, when we understand about healing, we understand that we are dealing with people who are overtly in a negative spiritual state. That has to be understood first and foremost. Yeah, they are in a negatively spiritual state. It does not mean that these individuals are negative people. Yeah, it's because of the resonance of that negativity around them has made them almost very toxic. That even being around other people, they can affect people. You see, there's a reality to this as well. So what we have to understand is when you take these individuals and you put them on this sort of journey and say, well, what you have to do is perform, and I think the general rule of thumb with regards to understanding this is that when these people then go into the realms of the exoteric ritualistic institutions where religion is being followed from just purely an exoteric platform, a physical form of worship only, with just a form and relation to the form, but not with the essence of the function. So when we're having discussions in that, and these people are then going to these types of institutions, what they're being told is go back to the basic tenets of religion, which is to be obedient to God. So you must be obedient, and also you must carry on with your exoteric practices. Now, the exoteric practices are not going to be enough to release the shackles of negativity that are surrounding that individual, because the overwhelming state of that individual is, as we said, in a negatively spiritual state. Now, the exoteric practice alone, because they do not have understanding of the essence of the function of the form, then they're not truly going to be able to allow to heighten themselves to a state of being able to self-heal. And that's what this discussion really is going to open up into, that sort of concept, in understanding that why is it that just merely devoting oneself to just exoteric practice doesn't actually have any real benefits to healing. and he doesn't, because the simplistic understanding is this: that negative energy is intangible. It's not tangible. Exoteric practice is something that is tangible. Again, it's, it's a physical movement. You are doing or performing in an act of, obviously, in the process of what the religious doctrine has laid out for you, of whichever religion you follow. Now, what we have to understand is, in its most simple state, negative energy is intangible, and it's also from the esoteric. So how do you take a problem from the esoteric and deal with it from the exoteric? It's very difficult to do that. You cannot solve a problem of the esoteric just merely with, sort of blind faith, as it were, having blind faith. God calls us in all the scriptures to call man, when I say man, and we use that loosely, men, women, and all the other denominations of people out there, in terms of understanding that what we have to accept is God is calling us to a sense of reason. Well, he's asking us to reflect. He is asking us to question him. Yeah? To question him. To question him and say, well, why are we here? What is the greater purpose of all of this? You see, when people are in a very sort of a negatively charged state, that they themselves are not able to push themselves out of this, because the esoteric value of the exoteric function, or the form, is not carried over. So then you have to then move on to the realm of going to those who can assist you. And in the Quran, he says that very beautifully in Surah Fatiha, the opening chapter of the Quran, in verse 7, he says, Ana amta alayhim, to seek the path of those who have been favored. And so we have to then question this: who are those who have been favored? Because if the Holy Prophet himself is mentioned in the Quran, in the scripture, by name, which he is many times, and there is a surah also named after him, so why then would God, in his wisdom, not mention seek the path of Muhammad, who has been favored? He could have said that if he wanted to. As we know, God is capable of everything. It's at his will everything happens, and he has things set for a purpose. So what we have to understand is that we ourselves cannot assimilate ourselves to become like the Holy Prophet, even though we try and imbibe in the traditions, which are the Sunnah. That's what then traditionally known as. But it's not just the traditions alone that are going to be able to carry the weight of removing the negativity that is a reality of the esoteric dimension. So when we're talking about is imperfection a perception, it is. It all down to perception, because when you see someone praying, your perception of someone praying in a physical form, you then align themselves to say that they are pious, that they are holy, that they are one with God. But the truth of reality is that is far from the truth, because when you introduce such individuals who are highly negatively charged, and you take these negatively the negatively sort of spiritual state of these individuals, in terms of how they are and how they have become, along with everything else that they're having to deal with, and you put them before someone who is an advocate of just exoteric practice, the physical form of worship, they themselves will not be able to do anything, because God has not given them the permissions to be able to deal with that negativity. So therefore then it calls into question, in saying that you have to understand that there is a dimension, a reality to esoteric practice, that you have to go and keep crossing the boundaries, of seeking that journey. I mean, you yourself, as a human being born into this world, when you were born into this world, you still had to depend on a higher being, which was your mother, yeah, or one who would look after you, and you relied on them for the nurturing and the nurturing of yourself to develop. And God, when he talks in chapter 2 of the Holy Quran, where he talks about to not follow the religion of your forefathers blindly, he's saying that you have to question things in order to make progress. So then we have people who understand the concept of innovation. They say, well, what is innovation? Innovation itself is just a relative term. You know, progress is innovation. But progress is something that is happening to us in our daily lives all the time. So what we have to understand is it's only truly by looking at those who are spiritually distressed and aggrieved that truly we can understand the fundamentals of the true reality of religion. Because it's from that reality of which the esoteric practice and the exoteric practice both come together in a beautiful, beautiful state of harmony. And it's in that harmony, that God's wisdom is there, and it and that sort of divine assistance comes and is able to then help those individuals and be able to put them in a position where they're spiritually rebalanced, their negativity is removed to a degree, because again, everyone is under test, everyone is on this path, for a purpose. So with regards to the Divine Clinic Foundation, with what it is, it's a place where people come to get rebalanced, to get fixed, and then to go back out to the world. But they go with the right tools and the right resources. It's not a place where you come and learn jurisprudence. It's not a place where you come and learn, law and things like this, because these are all things that govern your worldly life. And God says in the Holy Quran, He says that He will raise you with your leaders. So who are your leaders? And if your leaders are around you and you yourself, and I say this to you, dear listener, if you're listening and you're spiritually afflicted, then should you then be in a position to be able to go to the leaders of your community and express, your symptoms and your plight to them, because they are people of good standing within the religious community. And the reality is that these people then would say, well, we only know the value of the exoteric. All we deal with is just the exoteric form of religion. We do not understand the esoteric. And the reality is that when you take a step back and you look at the three major religions of the world, you look at Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Now, when you look at Judaism is a religion which has elements of spirituality, but it's mainly focused on the laws, the laws of Moses. Yeah, so those are there, the commandments from God, in which one has to turn to obedience to God. So it's mostly about the Sharia, the compliance, the regulation, yeah, the governance, in disciplining oneself to be in a state of obedience to God. So what we understand is Judaism, it brought with it the law of God. When we look at Christianity, we understand that even Jesus, peace be upon him, was born of a virgin mother, and even from a very young age was displaying such, miraculous things, talking from the cradle, talking with wisdom at such a young age to clergymen of the time, in order to bring about justice in social injustice where it was happening, and it was rife because the clergymen were corrupting or using the religion of the old in order to suppress the people. And obviously with Jesus, where he was trying to then bring about a revolution of reclaiming back the spirit of man. And that's quite beautiful, because then you understand fundamentally, and you look at Christianity today, it's more about the spirituality. It's all about that spiritual arm. There isn't much focus on the law itself, as it were. It's more to do with the spirituality. So when you look at Judaism itself brings a law, and then Christianity comes and brings the spirituality aspect of that. But then you have the seal of the prophets. You have Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his holy family and his loyal companions. And what you understand upon his reality is that the religion that was brought, through Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that it brings about the combination of the law and the spirit together. So you have that perfect balance and that perfect harmony in which then you're able to move forward and progress as God had intended for you. So that's truly when you can start, going towards the path of attaining the higher levels of consciousness, because you have to look in the sense of progress. The religions themselves are progressive. You've gone from Judaism to Christianity to Islam, and
And
it's
I
very
think
beautiful.
it's coming back to how the exoteric, it has its limitations because you need both to work hand in hand, esoteric and
Yeah,
exoteric. And when you look at it in terms of the healing perspective, spirituality is something today, trying to find a spiritual master that has perfected their faith and able to help humanity with no judgment. And here, for all faiths, all genders, gender, social class, that is what a true spiritual master here is, does not segregate when one is seeking help. Because we at the Divine Clinic Foundation are here for all of humanity. And we do stand on the principle of, there is one God and he has created all of us as his favorite creation. And when we understand healing and the trials and tribulation that man goes through, the help that we offer here is for everybody. And what we strive is through these spiritual cleanse to perfect the heart, come cleanse, take all the negativity, so that when we talk about, is imperfection a perception, you are given a platform to see how truly it is to feel when your heart is in a perfected state of this elevation through a spiritual cleanse. And then, should you decide to continue and carry forward, we all have choices every day that we make, and how we like to invest our time. But truly, we know when we're looking for peace, ultimate peace, you will not get that peace when it comes to the material aspect. And it's really going within yourself to self-reflect and to God and the reverence of God, because it says in the Holy Quran, surely my reverence shall they find peace. And saying with all of this in terms of healing and discussion of the perception of imperfection, we as beings are created here as a test to overcome our ego. And when we master that, then we are able to perfect ourselves. With this, Imam Saab, we are nearing the end of our segment. I'd like you to add on to anything else that could help our audience today with this subject matter. It would be greatly appreciated.
of course. And I just want to just really close off with just really saying that, for those who are listening and understanding that, if there is negative affliction around you, or, you are sensing something that is is not of the norm, because again, it's very easy to assimilate yourself to a situation and say, this is now my norm. This is my reality now. I have accepted this. And what we're saying is, no, don't accept it. Don't accept anything but perfection. But you must start with the first step in acknowledging what the truth is, and to be true to yourself and to say, yes, there is a problem, and I want to find out more in terms of how I can achieve a higher state of peace, a more sustained state of peace. And I think that's what we're trying to do, really, is just to try and send a message globally, nationally, internationally, just to say that the peace is here, and it's there, and it's those who wish to take it, and to take it with their hearts open your chest and to take, because God is giving. He's most abundant. So with that, really, and just to conclude on that, It's been a very interesting discussion. So I thank you again for allowing us to give us time to resonate on these matters. I think it's very, very important.
Thank you, Imam Saab, and thank you for our audience and listening in. And inshallah, we look forward to continue our discussion in our next podcast series. Assalamu alaikum.